There are men who do not step back because they stopped caring. They step back because what they feel becomes too strong to hide, too heavy to carry, too real to control. Listen closely, because this changes everything. Sometimes the man who goes quiet is not the one who feels the least. Sometimes he is the one who feels the most. He looks calm on the outside, but inside, something is shaking. His chest gets tight. His thoughts get louder. His heart starts racing over simple things like a message, a pause, a change in your tone. And that is where the story really begins. Not with coldness, not with rejection, but with intensity. The kind that enters a person's inner world and stirs up every fear they buried years ago. So before you assume distance means nothing, stay with me. Because what you are about to hear may change the way you see silence, love, and emotional pain. Some connections do not arrive softly. They enter like a storm. They touch places no one else could reach. They wake up old wounds, old memories, old fears a person thought were gone. And when that happens, love does not always pull someone closer first. Sometimes it makes them freeze. Sometimes it makes them run. And if you have ever looked into someone's eyes and felt love there, then watch their actions turn distant. This message is for you. What comes next matters more than you think. So do not click away now. There is a kind of love that does not feel light and easy at first. It feels deep. It feels dangerous. It feels like standing at the edge of a cliff and knowing one step can change your whole life. Many people are taught that real love always creates closeness right away, but human emotion is not that simple. Sometimes the deepest love creates confusion before it creates peace. Sometimes the strongest bond creates fear before it creates trust. A man may move away emotionally not because his feelings became weaker, but because they became too powerful for his old defenses to handle. When he truly connects, not just with beauty, not just with attraction, but with the soul of another person, something hidden inside him starts to move. His guarded side wakes up. His old pain wakes up. His fear of loss wakes up. Suddenly, he is not just dealing with romance. He is dealing with everything he never healed. And that is why distance can appear at the exact moment feelings become serious. It sounds strange, but it happens every day. The deeper the feeling, the more exposed he becomes. The more exposed he becomes, the more he wants control. And when he cannot find that control, he creates space. Not always because he wants to leave, but because he does not know how to stay open without feeling like he is losing himself in the process. Many men were not raised to understand emotion. They were raised to manage it, hide it, crush it, outwork it, laugh it off, or bury it under silence. Since early life, a lot of them learned one message again and again: feel less, show less, need less. So when love finally enters in a real way, it does not just touch the heart. It opens every locked room inside. It brings out vulnerability they never practiced. It shows them how deeply another person can affect their peace, their sleep, their thoughts, even their sense of identity. And that can be terrifying. A woman may think he became distant because she did something wrong, because she was not enough, because the spark faded. But often the truth is more complex and more painful. He became distant because being near her made him feel too much. Her presence mattered too much. Her absence hurt too much. Her voice carried too much weight. And the one trait that often creates this distance is emotional intensity, not appearance, not timing, not even the relationship label itself. It is the intensity of what wakes up inside him when he is with her. Some people make you feel calm. Others make you feel alive in a way you cannot explain. And when someone touches the deepest layers of a man's inner world, his first response is not always courage. Sometimes it is retreat. Sometimes it is self-protection. Sometimes it is silence. When this kind of connection happens, strange things begin inside him. His mind becomes louder than usual. Every message starts to matter. Every pause feels loaded. Every small shift feels like a warning. He begins to read into everything. He studies your words. He replays conversations. He notices details he never used to notice. The possibility of rejection becomes huge in his mind, not because he is weak, but because now there is something real to lose. A man who feels nothing can stay relaxed. He can play games. He can keep things casual. He can float through connection without fear. But a man who truly cares becomes emotionally exposed. And exposure is frightening to someone who has spent years protecting his inner world behind invisible walls. That is why some men grow colder after falling deeply. Not because the fire died, but because the fire became hard to manage. They fear saying too much. They fear showing too much. They fear wanting too much. And without even planning it, they start to create distance as emotional armor. If you have ever felt confused by this, you are not imagining it. The energy says one thing, the behavior says another. That mixed signal can break the heart. But it often comes from overwhelm, not emptiness. Keep listening, because this next part explains why the silence gets so heavy when feelings become real. There is a painful truth inside many men that almost no one talks about. The more deeply they love, the more deeply they feel the risk of pain. And vulnerability is something many of them were never taught to carry well. The world praises men for being strong, calm, fearless, controlled. But it rarely teaches them what to do when one person suddenly becomes emotionally important enough to shake their whole inner system. Nobody teaches them how to process love that keeps them awake at night. Nobody teaches them how to handle the fear of losing someone who starts to feel emotionally sacred. So they choose the one thing that feels safer than honesty: distance, silence, withdrawal. They disappear for a while, not always because you stop mattering, but because they are trying to regain control over feelings that have become too loud inside. They sit alone replaying your words. They wonder why your absence hits them so hard. They ask themselves why your energy can calm them and destroy them in the same breath. And the deeper the bond feels, the more frightened they become by how much power it has over them. This is why intense love often brings confusion before clarity. The heart recognizes the connection fast, but the ego panics because it knows life may never feel the same again. That panic creates hesitation. That hesitation creates silence. And silence, when misunderstood, can slowly ruin something that was real. Old wounds have a way of rising when love becomes serious. A man may have lived through betrayal, abandonment, shame, rejection, emotional neglect, or years of feeling unseen long before he ever met the woman who now matters to him. Those injuries do not vanish just because love shows up. In fact, real love often wakes them up. When someone truly matters, every old scar starts to ache again. The fear of not being enough gets louder. The fear of being left gets sharper. The fear of being emotionally destroyed becomes hard to ignore. So instead of risking that kind of exposure, many men create space without fully understanding why. They tell themselves they need time. They say they need to think. They convince themselves distance will help them feel clear. But often what they are really trying to escape is the force of their own emotions. Human beings do this all the time. We run from what we want most because wanting it makes us feel vulnerable. A man can look emotionally unavailable while secretly thinking about the same woman every night. He can act detached while carrying a bond so strong it shapes his entire inner life. That contradiction confuses relationships because outside behavior does not always reveal inside truth. What looks like indifference may actually be fear. What looks like control may actually be chaos. And if you have ever been on the receiving end of that silence, you know how much it can hurt. But there is more happening under the surface than most people ever see. Some men honestly believe their distance is a form of protection. They think they are saving the woman from their confusion, their mood swings, their unresolved pain, their emotional instability, or the parts of themselves they do not yet trust. They fear becoming harmful. They fear disappointing her. They fear failing the emotional demands that love brings. So they step back, hoping silence will reduce the intensity. But buried feelings do not die. They grow heavier. They become restlessness. They become regret. They become the late-night stare at the ceiling. They become the message never sent. There is something deeply sad about being loved by someone who cannot fully express it. Their eyes reveal more than their words. Their pauses carry storms. Their distance feels cold, yet underneath it, there may be warmth they are too afraid to show. Sometimes they look at you like they found peace in your soul, and moments later they retreat into emotional isolation. If you misunderstand this, it can feel cruel, but often it is not cruelty. It is survival from a person who never learned how to stay open when love becomes overwhelming. Still, understanding the reason does not erase the damage. Silence can wound. Distance can confuse. Love still needs truth, effort, and emotional presence to survive. So yes, compassion matters. But so does reality. And the reality is simple. Deep feeling without emotional skill can become destructive, even when the love itself is genuine. That is why what happens next in a relationship matters more than the feeling alone. Many emotionally intense men do not love halfway. When they care completely. They notice everything. They remember the small details you forgot you ever shared. They sense changes in your mood before you say a word. They carry your presence into quiet moments, into songs, into long drives, into empty nights, into the middle of success, into the middle of failure. You stay with them even when they say nothing. But because the feeling is so strong, they fear what will happen if they reveal its full depth. They think if they open the door fully, they will lose all control over themselves. And that may be the deepest truth here. Love is not just romance. It is transformation. It drags hidden fears to the surface. It reveals insecurity. It challenges the illusion of total independence. It asks a person to be seen without armor. And many people are unprepared for what that demands. They expect attraction. They expect excitement. They expect chemistry. What they do not expect is the identity shift that can come with real attachment. That is why a strong man can suddenly seem fragile in the presence of true intimacy. Not because he became weak, but because real connection strips away emotional protection. Underneath every strong image is still a human being who wants to be understood without shame. And when he does not know how to ask for that safely, he may choose distance instead of honesty, silence instead of confession, disappearance instead of vulnerability. If you have ever loved someone like this, you know the emotional whiplash it creates. One moment you feel deeply connected to them, the next moment they seem far away, almost unreachable. Their energy feels warm, but their actions feel cold. Their presence says stay, but their behavior says back away. That kind of inconsistency creates confusion because human beings need emotional clarity to feel safe, but people are rarely as simple as their actions. Fear, shame, trauma, pride, insecurity, and old pain can all distort the way love is shown. Some people chase love when they fear losing it. Others run from love when it becomes too real. Both responses can come from the same root: fear. Fear tells a man that distance is safer than dependence. Fear tells him silence is safer than truth. Fear tells him emotional detachment will protect him from heartbreak. But fear also creates loneliness, because no soul is built to live cut off from real closeness forever. Deep down, every person wants to be seen, accepted, understood, and loved without needing to hide. Late at night, a man who loves deeply may sit alone with thoughts he cannot explain to anyone. He remembers your laugh. He replays your words. He wonders if he should reach out or keep pretending he feels less than he does. His pride tells him to stay back. His heart tells him to return. And inside that private war, he suffers more than most people realize. Stay with this, because the difference between emotional emptiness and emotional overload changes how everything should be understood. Many distant men are not empty. They are overloaded. That difference matters. An emotionally empty person feels very little. An emotionally overloaded person feels too much and does not know how to process it in a healthy way. When someone lacks emotional tools, distance becomes a coping style. They pull away not because love died, but because love activated fears they never healed. That is why self-awareness matters so much. Without it, love becomes confusing. Without emotional honesty, relationships become unstable. Without healing, people project old pain onto new connection. A man who has not faced his inner fears may sabotage the relationship his heart wants most. Not because he enjoys hurting the woman he loves, but because he is unconsciously trying to protect himself from imagined disaster. And still, even inside all this pain, there is something powerful hidden in intense love. It proves the soul is alive. It proves connection can still reach beyond logic. In a world full of shallow contact, deep feeling remains sacred. Messy, yes. Frightening, yes. Complicated, absolutely. But sacred. Because when someone touches you deeply enough to awaken both love and fear at the same time, it means the bond reached beyond surface attraction. The danger is when people misunderstand this process completely. Some women blame themselves for a man's distance and start questioning their value. But often his retreat has more to do with his wounds than with her worth. That does not excuse harmful behavior. It simply explains that human behavior is often more complex than it first appears. Still, love cannot survive forever inside unspoken feeling. This is where everything becomes real. A man must eventually choose whether he will keep hiding behind fear or grow into the emotional strength required for true intimacy. Because deep feeling alone is not enough. Love without courage becomes self-sabotage. Passion without communication becomes confusion. Attachment without honesty becomes suffering. At some point, truth has to be spoken. Vulnerability has to be accepted. Emotional walls have to come down. Otherwise, even the deepest connection starts to suffocate under everything left unsaid. Maybe you have spent nights asking why someone who clearly cared became distant. Maybe you felt love in their eyes and confusion in their actions. Maybe their silence hurt more than direct rejection ever could. If so, hear this clearly. People reveal their level of healing by how they handle love. A healed man does not see closeness as a threat. He understands vulnerability is not weakness. He speaks. He stays present. He does not disappear every time his feelings deepen. But a wounded man often mistakes emotional intensity for danger. The deeper he feels, the more threatened he becomes by his own openness. And until he faces that fear on purpose, he may keep repeating the same cycle with the people who matter most. This is the hard truth. Love can be present and still fail if fear remains in charge. And if that line hits hard, keep listening, because the next part is where the lesson turns inward and becomes personal. Sometimes people enter our lives not only to love us, but to expose what is still unhealed within us. Some connections are not casual. They are mirrors. They show us the parts of ourselves still trapped in fear. They force emotional growth by making avoidance impossible. That is why this kind of bond can feel both beautiful and painful at the same time. Many people are starving for deep connection while being terrified of it. They want intimacy, but fear vulnerability. They want love, but fear abandonment. They want to be understood, but hide their true feelings. This contradiction sits at the center of so much human pain. We build walls to protect ourselves, then discover those same walls become emotional prisons. If a man truly loves deeply, his distance is rarely simple. Underneath it may be longing, fear, confusion, emotional overload, unresolved wounds, and battles you cannot fully see. That does not mean you should chase endlessly. It does not mean you should lose yourself trying to rescue someone who refuses to grow. But it does mean surface behavior does not always tell the whole story. Sometimes the coldest silence hides the warmest feeling. Sometimes the greatest distance hides the strongest attachment. We all carry invisible history, childhood pain, betrayals, heartbreak, insecurity, shame. When real love arrives, it touches all of it at once. Some people rise into courage, others retreat into fear. Either way, love reveals who we really are beneath the mask. And that revelation is never small. It changes everything if we let it. There is also a spiritual loneliness inside many men that almost no one speaks about. They were taught to achieve, provide, compete, win, endure, and survive, but not to express vulnerability without embarrassment. So when deep love finally appears, it collides with years of emotional training. One part of them wants to surrender to the bond completely. Another part fights to stay in control. That internal clash creates the distance that confuses so many relationships. You may notice that a man who loved deeply sometimes keeps watching from far away. He checks silently if you are okay. He thinks about reaching out more often than you know. He remains emotionally connected long after separation. because real bonds do not disappear on command. The mind tries to move on, but the deeper self remembers. Real connection leaves marks that time cannot quickly erase. Yet here is the lesson hidden under all this pain. Love alone is never enough when fear runs the relationship. Emotional depth without emotional courage becomes a trap. A person must learn to speak, to stay, to face discomfort, to remain present when old fear says run. Otherwise, even a rare connection can be lost, not because it lacked feeling, but because it lacked mature expression. And that is one of the saddest truths in life. Some of the most powerful bonds end not from lack of love, but from lack of emotional readiness. Let that sink in. Because once you understand that, you stop taking every silence as proof that you were not enough. And that matters deeply, because too many people turn another person's withdrawal into a judgment about their own worth. They think, if I were more beautiful, more lovable, more patient, more valuable, he would have stayed open. But often the distance has little to do with your value. Sometimes you simply awakened emotions he did not know how to hold. Sometimes your presence touched places he spent years trying not to feel. Sometimes the connection became so psychologically intense that stepping back felt easier to him than staying vulnerable. That does not mean you should excuse poor treatment. Pain never gives anyone the right to be careless with another heart. Love still needs accountability. Love still needs honesty. Love still needs effort. But understanding the psychology of withdrawal allows you to see people with more compassion and less self-blame. Not every distant person is heartless. Some are wounded souls struggling with emotional depth they were never trained to navigate. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is understand the truth without abandoning your standards. You can have compassion and still require clarity. You can recognize someone's pain and still choose not to live inside their confusion. That balance is strength. Real love is not proven by endless suffering. It is proven by truth, courage, consistency, and presence. If those things are missing, then no matter how deep the feeling is, the relationship begins to starve. And once a relationship starts starving, even strong emotion cannot feed it for long. One day, a man who has spent years running from emotional intensity may finally realize that love was never the enemy. Vulnerability was never weakness. Feeling deeply was never something shameful. And when that moment comes, he may look back at every silence, every retreat, every distance he created with the people he loved most, and finally understand the pain he caused by refusing to speak. Emotional avoidance protects no one in the end. It only delays healing. The soul does not want shallow connection. It wants truth. It wants presence. It wants the courage to be fully seen without hiding. And the people who change our lives are rarely the ones who simply entertained us for a while. They are the ones who forced us to meet ourselves honestly. They are the ones who woke up sleeping parts of our heart. They are the ones who showed us how deeply we can feel when the walls come down. So, if someone once loved you deeply and still kept their distance, do not rush to believe you were hard to love. Sometimes you were simply too emotionally significant for a wounded heart to handle well. Sometimes your presence exposed everything they had spent years suppressing. Sometimes the bond became so intense that fear felt stronger than openness. That is tragic, yes, but it is also human. And if this message is hitting a nerve, do not leave yet, because the final truth may be the one that stays with you long after this ends. The highest form of love is not two wounded people endlessly triggering each other's fears while calling it destiny. The highest form of love is when both people choose growth over avoidance. It is when honesty becomes stronger than pride. It is when communication becomes stronger than silence. It is when presence becomes stronger than panic. Real love asks for courage. The courage to say what is true. The courage to stay emotionally available. The courage to stop running every time vulnerability appears. The courage to remain present when fear whispers that distance feels safer. Because in the end, the greatest tragedy is not loving deeply. The greatest tragedy is allowing fear to silence a love that might have changed your life. Right now, somewhere, there are hearts separated not by lack of feeling, but by lack of expression. There are souls missing each other behind walls built from old pain. There are people pretending they feel nothing while carrying oceans inside them. And maybe that is why this message reaches so deeply, because part of you already knows this truth. A man who loves deeply may keep his distance for one powerful reason: emotional intensity strong enough to awaken both love and fear at the same time. But only those willing to face their own heart will discover what real connection is meant to do. Not destroy them, not trap them, not shame them, heal them. And if love is real, then sooner or later, healing becomes the only road that leads it home. So, if you recognize this story, take the lesson carefully. Do not chase endlessly. Do not beg for clarity from someone committed to silence. Do not lose yourself trying to decode every mixed signal. But also, do not reduce every distant heart to a simple lack of love. Some people are not detached because they are cold. They are detached because they are flooded inside. Some people are not careless because they feel nothing. They are careless because they do not know how to carry what they feel responsibly. That truth should not trap you. It should free you. It should help you stop blaming yourself for battles that were never yours to fix alone. It should help you understand that chemistry is powerful, but emotional maturity is what makes love safe enough to stay. And if someone truly wants a future with you, they must do more than feel deeply. They must learn to speak deeply, stay deeply, and show up deeply. Anything less leaves love half alive. So remember this: intensity is not the same as readiness. Longing is not the same as commitment. Feeling everything is not the same as building something. The deepest connections in life are not meant to be escaped from, but they are also not meant to survive on emotion alone. They survive on courage, truth, healing, and action. That is the line between a love that haunts you and a love that holds you. And once you understand that, you stop romanticizing silence and start valuing the brave kind of love that knows how to stay.